Welcome to Mobilize News. I'm Bailey Chambers, your show guide. In all parts of the world, people are asking how to create the future when the world is upside down. Right now, we're having a conversation with Alan Enzo of Permaculture Education. The topic, holistic design, ecological design, and ecological economics. We're going to address four key things. Where do we want to be? How do we get to where we are? How can we create a pathway to get there? And how do we make sure we avoid mistakes from the past? Let's jump right in. Hello, Alan. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with ecological design and ecological economics.
Okay. Well, I went to Ohio State, and after I graduated, I got in working in emergency management and cleaning up oil spills, train wrecks, chemical disasters, factory explosions, and did some ecological restoration projects as well. So, in university, MBA and Ph.D, ecological economics and management, and won some awards for my research and writing around ecological economics. After that, I had several years of working on these emergency management projects for the state of Tennessee and also through the private sector with OHM remediation, just cleaning up the earth. And I was on a mission to do that, and I have been for over 25 years now. After getting out of that and going into more finance officer type roles, I discovered permaculture design. And it's also known as ecological design. And I'll explain a little bit more about why both of those terms are used. There's a multidisciplinary approach that and ethics include in permaculture design. And that really resonated with me because so many disciplines out there, they simply have not integrated ethics into the career path or the way that professionals operate. And that's a problem. This is one of the problems that we see with systems around the world is that, there's no ethics associated with them, and they're all about making money and short-term profits, stock market returns, and all of the social, environmental, and care for the earth kind of things come last after shareholder value increases. So anyway, how I got involved, I've always been in projects working with military, with the state, with lots of private landholders on how to rehabilitate their land. And after taking the PDC course, which is the Permaculture Design Certificate course, I realized there's a different mindset. You have to take a systems thinking mindset as opposed to a linear thinking mindset, which we are taught from early days of education here in the West. We're taught linear thinking models. And to switch that and to learn about permaculture and learn about this ecological thinking or systems thinking mindset, it just really resonated with me. And using the system to design landscapes, even design businesses for resilience, and how to redesign failing systems, including economic systems, local economic design. So that's about it for how I got into it.
Okay. Mobilize News specializes in promoting solutions to the world's biggest problems. You mentioned in the past about wicked problems or complex issues that cannot be solved with our current linear thinking, education, and policy models. In your opinion, what is a better way to approach complex problems facing the world today?
So a few years ago, there was a article, and the term was being thrown around about wicked or sticky problems. When we think about big problems characterized by multiple definitions, broad range of stakeholders, different political battles over what disciplines or actors have authority to offer the solutions. And then we have media propaganda used to steer solutions towards predetermined policies and regulations. So in this world, when we have big problems, it's not easy to look at those and come up with solutions. And one of the reasons is we have this conventional linear thinking problem solving method that is used in academia in the West, all the political environments. We're taught to think in this linear. So when you have science and policy solutions that are linear thinking, you often end up with unintended negative consequences, things that they didn't see because they're basically looking like this. This is why we see so much bad design out there. And as an ecological designer, I see bad design every day, everywhere.
Of course.
There's so many opportunities for us to clean up and redesign these old, sick, non-working systems that we have. Now, one of the biggest issues here is conventional Western universities cannot offer the solutions to these wicked problems or sticky problems because of the institutional silo effect. And that refers to academic disciplines. They're separate domains and, have been for hundreds of years, and they don't talk to each other to help solve big problems and work together on things. They want ownership in their discipline of this is something we do, this is something we take care of. So multidisciplinary academic systems need to be looked at, and including scientific, economic, political, and social. So examples of these sticky problems are climate change adaptation, deforestation, industrial transportation pollution, homelessness, food insecurity, and local economic revitalization. So the tools we have for solving these big problems are already out there. It's just people don't look at things from an ecological or holistic or wider mindset. Ecological literacy includes basics of ecology. Everything's connected. We look at pattern recognition. Humans recognize patterns. Humans are specially designed to recognize patterns, natural patterns, and we can recognize when a pattern is not natural as well. And sometimes we just overlook the fact that it's not a natural pattern and go with it. Edge effect and diversity are terms that we talk about in syntropy. I can explain syntropy in the fact if you had trees in a forest growing, doing their thing without interruption, without any kind of artificial manipulation, there would be syntropy. That means nature's design is happening and it's going all natural, the way it's supposed to go, the way it's supposed to grow. It has everything it needs, and it provides ecosystem services to all those around it. Now, there isn't many examples of that kind of syntropy in nature unless you're, in the bush, in the undisturbed old growth forest. But that's a big subject. The other thing to solve these big problems is we need some kind of ethics. We have to agree on what's ethical in this approach and what's not. For instance, I don't think it's ethical or necessary or even intelligent to be spraying things in the sky to try to reduce the temperature or stop the sunlight. I just think that's one of these approaches that someone thinks is a good idea, but they're just not thinking straight. There's other effects that happen. And then we have invisible structures that affect these big problems. Invisible structures is something we talk about in permaculture design. And we have to consider the invisible structures at work in the environment when we look to redesign or fix a system. So we have natural law. That's immutable laws that we all must follow. If you walk off the edge of that cliff, you're gonna fall and you're gonna hit the bottom. You
Right.
can't just walk off the cliff and say, I don't think it's gonna happen. The natural law there, and you mess with a natural law, it's gonna mess with you back. So you need to know about those laws, the legal and regulatory environment. You may need to revise laws and policies to solve some problems. So food insecurity, you can't have a law that says you're not allowed to have chickens in your backyard. You're not allowed to harvest water from your roof. Those are things that some people might need to just stay alive, and to just to sort of solve some of these big problems, food deserts. There's no place to get food around here. You got to maybe relax the regulations and allow people to grow food, have some animals, catch water off the roof, do those things to be self-reliant. The business environment also with these big problems, because we have monopolies, oligopolies, nepotism, and those are things that keep certain people in power and not others. We have to look at the shared values of the community for any solutions that are thought of and include ethics.
What is permaculture design and what is ecological design?
Okay, there's lots of definitions for permaculture design, and so many teachers and consultants around the world have forwarded their particular words for it. Mine is permaculture design is a system that incorporates traditional and indigenous ecological knowledge with responsible modern technologies to provide for our needs, while at the same time respecting the earth and all species. So permaculture design is a holistic approach to design which incorporates systems thinking, resilience building, self-reliance, environmental remediation, ecological restoration, relocalization, and decentralization strategies, and ecological or closed loop zero waste systems. What we do in permaculture design, it's a systems toolbox for looking at the whole system or problem, seeing the connections between key elements or parts, observing how the parts relate, and then planning to repair six systems by applying ideas learned from long-term renewable working systems. A lot of people focus on gardening and farming with permaculture, and that's great because food is one of the, very much primary need of ours. But the idea is that permaculture design can be used to plan and design homes, small businesses, regional organizations, and villages, and the whole system all the way up to the larger regional systems is meant to be used in this design process. So one of the most important things is permaculture design is the first design discipline to incorporate ethics. So, we have MDs, they have their certain code of ethics, and different guilds, there's only a handful that I know of that actually have a code of ethics that are very strictly followed by members. Ours includes a permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, and future care. And sometimes the future care one is called share the surplus. So we use those ethics in everything we do in the design process, and it keeps your mind to solutions that work for everybody and don't harm the environment or other people. So it's a good thing.
How do you overcome challenges and obstacles to mainstream adoption, systems thinking, permaculture design, and ecological design?
Well, the challenges and obstacles are the entrenched linear thinking models and actors that believe that they're the only ones that should be providing solutions. Like some of the government agriculture organizations I can think of, they refuse to mention permaculture. And it's because permaculture is, you can't control it. There's no head organization in permaculture design. So there's no real authority that you can go to and get a statement from. It's decentralized. We have rules that we follow, and we have ways of teaching, directives that we follow, but each individual instructor is empowered to have their own business, to do their own design jobs. And it was just designed that way because the founders were particularly not wanting this to be some discipline that would be captured by academia and turned into a pay-to-play kind of system like a lot of other disciplines. So there's good and bad with being decentralized like that, but we deal with it. But how do we overcome these challenges towards mainstream adoption of these ideas is education and demonstration. Permacultureeducation.org is an organization that we started, and we teach the certification course. People get certified in permaculture design, and they often go and either start and work on their own farms and systems or small business, or they go out and teach and learn how to be a consultant and help people fix their sick systems and design properties for abundance and health. So, like we said before, there's bad design everywhere. And so we train designers to go out there. There's an enormous opportunity. The last time we did back of the envelope analysis on this is $4 billion a year is the opportunity right now for people in ecological design who are trained, and the available work out there is 4 billion. The need for systems to be redesigned, anywhere from ecological restoration projects, reforestation projects, regenerative organic farms. These are all, in great need now. After many years of being pushed towards big ag and big this and big centralized everything, the wisdom is coming back to realizing, hey, you know what? There was a time when 70 or 80% of the people were growing something or into farming. And now it's, I don't know, less than 20%, maybe less than 10%, and we've gone to these big, huge centralized systems, and guess what? They don't work. We're all suffering. So it'll swing back. The pendulum always swings back. We'll again have abundance of smaller systems, food producers, home-based systems, and decentralized design. So education is evolving away from universities and theory-based education towards experiential learning from those with real life experience designing solutions. And business is evolving away from the constant growth and profits first model towards more ethically and locally based business models. So they're all things we work on.
One of your specialty areas is ecological economics. What is ecological economics and how does it differ from conventional economics?
We're just stating that the focus is different. The focus is, this is not conventional neoclassical economics that they teach in universities. This is ecological, using a systems thinking mindset, and ecological, the ecology, what is around you, everything that's around you. So you're including all of that in the analysis. Conventional economists ignore important variables and produce flawed quantitative analysis, resulting in bad design and bad political policies. And the reason is they like models. They like quantitative models. And there's some magic black box. Someone comes out with this model and people are like, oh, look at that chart. Wow, it's so beautiful. And they very rarely look at, what data did you neglect or what variables did you not look at, because this significantly changes the analysis. And when we see economists putting out studies that are conventional economists, you have to be aware of that. They call them externalities. These are variables that we're actually telling you we're not considering in the analysis, and there are a lot of them. By focusing purely on quantitative models and statistics, it's possible to sidestep important variables in the scientific process and produce analyses that steer the conversation towards predetermined outcomes. Some examples are pollution, resource extraction, unemployment, crime rates, species extinction, wealth distribution, aesthetic value, and ecosystem services. So these are things that, are often externalities. We're not thinking about those. We're just looking at how much money it's going to make us, or how much our stock price is going to increase. Ecological economics addresses the relationship between ecosystems, all species, and economic systems, as opposed to neoclassical, which focuses on supply and demand and the driving forces behind production, pricing, and consumptions of goods and services. So ecological economics is a more ethical approach that's interdisciplinary, adopting systems thinking approach. It's not ethical to ignore certain stakeholders or leave out certain variables in economic analyses. Ecological economics realizes there are limits to growth, realizes there are limits to technology, supports conservation and ethical use of resources, incorporates decentralization and relocalization. And some examples would be the classic wetland example. say we have a popular area with shopping, and there's a forest over here, but in between there's a wetland, and it's very beautiful. They have some trails there that go through the wetland, and lots of fish, lots of birds, lots of critters, lots of beauty. But a developer goes to a conventional economist and says, we need you to do analysis for our shareholders that says, what if we take these 5 acres of wetland and turn it into a parking garage? You do the analysis and you tell us which would be better, to leave it as a wetland or to develop the parking garage. And they figure out, if developed with all those spaces, it'll bring in $2 million a year revenue to the city. And to solidify their argument, they leave certain variables out of the analysis, including water quality. How's it going to affect water quality if you change and don't have that wetland system cleaning the water like it is now? Storm drainage, air quality, crime statistics, loss of recreational opportunities for local residents, loss of ecosystem services to the local environment. Ecological economists would say, due to all of these variables that can't be quantified, you can't put a number on the loss of ecosystem services. If you take away that wetland and put a concrete parking structure there, it would be devastating. It would be like an incredible amount of money. You would, I would say, ecological economists would say, you can't put a value on that. The beauty of the older couple that's walking through that wetland every evening as part of their ritual and just experiencing that beauty and that wonder and that clean air and the wildlife. I mean, you can't put a price on that. So this is the argument with ecological economics. And in that case, the parking garage would never be considered for that location. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Thank you. Thank you. You mentioned where people could get certified, but for those people and people wanting to learn more, where can people learn more about systems thinking, permaculture design, and ecological design?
If you're interested in these topics, they are multidisciplinary, they're interdisciplinary, and you're not going to learn about them in conventional Western university because of the silo effect and the way that disciplines are separated. And, we do have some courses being taught at some universities that are related to permaculture, but you'll often find that those are tied to a horticulture department or forestry department, and they're not talking about the other aspects, including economics and natural building and intentional communities development. They're not talking about a lot of those things because they're in their silo of horticulture or whatever that discipline might be. So they're independent institutes like our own, Permaculture Education, international nonprofit, and we've been teaching people for 25 years. Hundreds of teachers out there, thousands of students who have learned this design system. I would say, don't waste your money and time going to university to learn this stuff. Find an organization, they're out there, and get certified and start your own business around it, around helping improve the earth or producing something of value to your local community. Find a way to be of service to others. So the initial training in permaculture design is accomplished through the 72-hour PDC course, and that's Permaculture Design Certificate course. There are 2-week residential on-the-ground programs, so sometimes a farm will host a program, but that ends up being $2,000, $3,000 plus dollars, and it's residential, so you have to be there, and it'll be like 2 weeks or more of lecture format, which is difficult for a lot of people, including the cost and time being away that long. So this is why we started Permaculture Education, because we have one of the best online certification programs. Steve Cran in Australia is one of the first permaculture teachers, first generation teacher, and we formed a group of first generation teachers who learned straight from the initial institute that is no longer. And we've consulted on hundreds of projects and trained thousands of designers over the past 25 years. In addition to the PDC course, we have advanced courses, agroforestry, food forest design, climate adaptation design certificate course. That one's really popular because instead of doing things like activism and protesting about the climate, they learn climate adaptation. And they get a certificate, and they know you can take action. You can actually do something on the ground to address these problems instead of other options.
Okay. And final question. It seems as if the word sustainable has been hijacked by corporate America and international political institutions to be planning sustainable things, items, schools, products, and services. In actuality, not everything that these organizations and corporations claim to be sustainable is sustainable. So there's so much greenwashing. It's hard for the average person to determine what sustainability actually is. So I understand you prefer the word regenerative over sustainable. So what is the difference to you between those two words?
Well, buzzwords. Over time, buzzwords appear in the human lexicon, and invariably they die out as the next best thing enters the conventional public narrative. In the world of design, the mainstream is now moving away from the overused and abused terms of green and sustainable and embracing regenerative as the next panacea. You will see a lot of government and UN communications mentioning regenerative agriculture, regenerative design, and this is basically permaculture design. The reason people use the other terms, ecological design and regenerative design, is to put a focus on the non-gardening and farming design. We're talking about designing structures, communities, water production, electricity, sanitation, all of these things, local community structures, including the invisible structures like trusts and laws and conservation. When you talk about ecological design and regenerative design, those things are more foremost in your mind, the whole design holistic system. So at this point, most of the general public is indifferent to the subject of sustainability. We don't want to sustain something. We're not trying to sustain the status quo and the way things are being done. We need to redesign and completely change the way things are being done. So sustainability is focusing on being less bad and instead doing more good. But that's not good enough. You're still going to have the same problems. So systems and products, including architecture, that are promoted as green or sustainable have failed to meet the expectations of both markets and society. The term is no longer of any value. And I learned an important lesson in graduate school. And it was what we were being taught was about 10 years behind what was currently happening in the real world. And this is management, finance, economics, and law. And all of these things, in addition to the information being behind the times, most of the professors had no real life business experience, no real life administration, management experience. And it just didn't make sense. So my experience, when I hear the words green or sustainable or sustainability, I'm automatically suspicious because it normally comes from people who are not working actually out in the field. They're just putting out reports. Like sustainable agriculture. It's not a suitable term because we're not trying to sustain the main agriculture systems that we have now, which are the big ag and the GMOs and the chemical agriculture. We're not trying to sustain that. We don't want to sustain that. We want regenerative, which feeds nutrients back into the earth and is no waste system and better for the environment because it's capturing carbon and has a lot more nutrients in the food. That's the regenerative system there. That's not, we're not trying to sustain the old system at all. So now you'll notice you'll see regenerative organic agriculture mentioned, which this is permaculture. This is the same thing. They don't want to use that term permaculture because it's not one they can control, like I was mentioning earlier. Of course, there are a lot of people using the term regenerative that aren't very regenerative either. So think of them as buzzwords, but a better way to say it. We have a spectrum going from green, sustainable, all the way to regenerative in permaculture design and ecological design. So ecological is at that far end towards syntropy, which we talked about earlier, which is just a natural, the way the earth and things would grow and operate if we weren't here. That would be syntropy. But rather than striving to reach that, we're just striving to reach in that direction. And ecological design is the answer, and it has the answers. And I'm here to share that.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Alan Enzo of Permaculture Education, for joining us at Mobilize News.